Family. We share our joy with them. We count on them in troubled times. They're ones who make us proud. So many of us have been inspired by the service of a relative whose sacrifices motivate us to do more, to be more. But family is not limited by the bonds of blood or name. It is shaped by the stories we share, the freedoms we cherish, and the nation we love and defend. Family is at the center of all we do at the Gary Sinise Foundation. Our mission is to honor our defenders, veterans, first responders, and always their loved ones who sacrifice alongside them.
For the flag!
Because that's what you do for family. Our commitment to family begins with our RISE programs. Our severely wounded, injured, ill, and aging heroes often live in total reliance on caregivers for tasks most of us take for granted. RISE was established to provide these heroes and their families with specially adapted smart homes, mortgage-free and custom-built from the ground up, as well as modifications to existing homes, mobility devices, and adapted vehicles. RISE is restoring independence and supporting empowerment for families across America. Our relief and resiliency programs keep families strong and spirits high. We provide HOPE, a program that offers support to those who are experiencing trauma, illness, injury, or loss, sometimes with assistance as simple as paying bills or buying groceries. Our Invincible Spirit Festivals celebrate the courage of our wounded heroes, their caregivers, and the families on the road to recovery at America's national military medical centers. Each festival includes a cookout by celebrity chef Robert Irvine and a concert by the Lieutenant Dan Band. The band continues to tour the nation in support of our defenders and their loved ones with a mission to deliver honor, gratitude, and rock and roll. Our newest program, Snowball Express, serves the children of our fallen military heroes, surviving spouses, and Gold Star families. In December 2018, we brought together 1,722 kids and their surviving parent or guardian for a 5-day retreat of hope and healing at the happiest place on earth, Disney World. Our community outreach and education programs honor the sacrifice of heroes from every generation and ensure their service will be remembered for years to come. Soaring Valor sends our greatest generation World War II veterans to New Orleans to tour the National World War II Museum built in their honor. Students accompany our veterans, learning the important lessons and history of World War II firsthand, bridging the gap between old and young, helping to ensure our future generations never forget. Our Ambassadors Council includes philanthropic celebrities, severely injured veterans, Congressional Medal of Honor recipients, and dedicated supporters of the military. They inspire, educate, and remind communities to recognize their local veterans and honor the sacrifices made by all of America's defenders. Since nothing offers an opportunity to bond like sharing a meal together, Serving Heroes shows gratitude to our nation's defenders by serving up classic American meals nationwide and at military outposts in Germany and Korea. A reminder to all who serve that we do not forget. And Arts and Entertainment Outreach invites anyone who has served to join us for a free dinner and dress rehearsal performance at one of the nation's premier theaters, extending our hand in support and appreciation of veterans across the generations. When catastrophe strikes, our families trust in the protection of our first responders. These men and women are vital to the safety and security of our communities. Through our First Responders Outreach, we provide funds for equipment, training, and wellness to America's firefighters, police, and EMTs. At the Gary Sinise Foundation, we work tirelessly to keep our defenders and their loved ones strong each and every day. We are honored to know our efforts have inspired so many to join our mission. What started as a passion of one is now over 50,000 donors strong. But there is always so much more to be done, and we must do all we can to meet the critical needs of our defenders. Join the Gary Sinise Foundation family as we show the pride and gratitude of our nation to all its heroes and the families that stand by their sides. While we can never do enough for our defenders, veterans, first responders, and the loved ones who sacrifice right alongside them, thank you. guys are awesome. We can always do a little more. Help serve our nation's defenders and their loved ones now. Visit GarySiniseFoundation.org.
We were noticing today it was 9 years, almost to the day, that you were here for the first time with a USO event, I think, here.
Yes, we had a screening here at the library for President and Mrs. Bush and a group of people, and it was a screening of a documentary that is called, I heard you laugh when it said Lieutenant Dan Band there, but all right, I have a band, it's called the Lieutenant Dan Band. And a buddy of mine made a documentary called Lieutenant Dan Band for the Common Good. He kind of followed me around for several months, band concerts, and one of my trips over to Iraq, and it's a nice documentary that's on our Gary Sinise Foundation website, and I've done so much with the USO. We set up a USO event here where we came and we screened the movie for folks. I had a lovely lunch with the President and Mrs. Bush, and they were sitting right here. And it was kind of intimidating. But they were so nice and so lovely, and they invited me back.
And you came back for a football game, I think.
Yeah, they said, come on to a football game. So the following year, I came back and
Is that the trip where you got stuck in the elevator with them?
Imagine getting stuck in the elevator with Mrs. Bush. She was not happy about the elevator. So yes, we got stuck in the elevator. It was pretty funny.
A little bit of a bonding experience.
Yeah, we bonded in there. Yeah, it was wonderful. And then I got to go out on the field with the president and sit in their box up there and watch the game. It was just tremendous. Such gracious, wonderful people. It's an honor for me to be here, to be able to talk about my book today. I wish they were there.
Well, we miss them. We're still getting used to not having them here in the front row. But so we're going to talk more about your work with the foundation in a few minutes. But first, kind of following the book. Congratulations on the book, by the way.
Thank you.
New York Times bestseller, right out of the starting gate.
Thank you.
Very nice. Very nice. But I think what we'd like to do is go back, as the book did, to your days before you got into acting and how you got into acting. You were in high school back in the early 70s, time that was sort of protest environment coming out of the Vietnam War, and you were would the term struggling student work or
non-student?
Non-student.
Maybe is what we should call. Yeah, non-student for the entire academic life, and I talk about that a little bit in the book. I started to write about the last post-September 11th period where my life kind of took a turn toward service and trying to support the men and women serving our country. And the subtitle of the book, A Journey from Self to Service, really speaks to what the book and what the story is about. I track my family history. My grandfather serving in World War I as an ambulance driver during the Battle of the Argonne in World War I. Very, very terrible, terrible battle. Over 26,000 killed in that battle alone. He was an ambulance driver ferrying our wounded back and forth. It was a dangerous mission because the Germans would target the ambulances and try to shoot them. And there's a story in the book where the ambulance was destroyed in front of my grandfather, and the one was behind him was destroyed. And somehow they didn't shoot his. He had 3 sons. The oldest of the 3 served as a navigator in World War II on a B-17 bomber The middle son, my uncle Jerry. The navigator is my Uncle Jack. My Uncle Jerry served in the Navy on a ship in the Pacific during the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and part of the occupation of Japan after the Japanese surrendered. And then my dad served in the Navy during the Korean War. And then I met my wife, the woman who would become my wife, in 1976, and on her side of the family, 2 Vietnam veterans, her brothers, both served in Vietnam. One was a combat assault helicopter pilot. The other was a West Pointer, and he served in the infantry as a platoon leader, lieutenant, then went back as a captain, a company commander, then went back to West Point and taught as a major. In fact, he was a TAC officer for General Mike Scaparrotti and General Vince Brooks.
So at the beginning of this journey from self to service, acting came into your life. Talk about how that happened. You were in high school.
So I said I was a non-student. And I write about that in the book. It's very amusing. I struggled from kindergarten all the way through high school. They wanted to send me back to kindergarten. In high school, the only thing that kind of kept me busy and focused was music. I played music from the time I was in 4th grade on, and it was the only reason, the only reason I wanted to go to school was because just run into my band members. And I happened to be standing in this hallway once when I was about a sophomore. I write about this in the book because it was truly one of the most significant things that ever happened to me. And I'm playing in this band, and I am really doing bad in school. And I mean, so bad, and I write about this, that I was this close to being asked to leave, invited to go, go somewhere else, And I'm standing in this hallway with these rugged-looking band members, and I'm about 16 years old, and this little lady comes blowing down the hallway, and she turns around, she looks at me, and she says, "Do you know the play West Side Story? It's about gang members. You look perfect, and I'm going to be directing that play, so come and audition." And then she blew off down the hall. But they give me a script, I'm stumbling through, and I'm making jokes and everything. The people are laughing, and I'm so terrible. But I was so amusing that she put me in the show. And it truly was one of the most significant moments of my life, because it completely turned my life in another direction. And I ended up, I was pretty good at it. And I fell in love with it. And all I wanted to do was be in plays in high school now. And now I had a new reason to come. I not only could play my music, but I had a reason to go because I wanted to be in the plays. And so I tried a little harder in school, and I auditioned for every play I could get. And I ended up being able to start a theater company after that, go into the movie business, and
you had a group of friends in high school that you worked with to start this theater company. I think we have a slide here that will show that, I think. There it is. So this is in, let's see, you were 21, yeah? This is 1976.
My hair is a little different there. That's 1976. So I got out of high school, and I got a bunch of kids together, and we started a theater company. And it was just kids. I was 18, and it was a bunch of kids that were still in high school, in the class 1973 and a half. And we called it Steppenwolf Theater. We started doing plays in a little church that my parents knew the architects of this church. And
church basement?
Well, no, that's a different one. Well, we first started in this church that my parents knew these folks, and they gave us a key and said we could use it. So we would go in after the kids. I got a job during the day because I was out of high school now. All the kids that were in the first couple of plays, they would finish school at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock and then come over to the church and we'd rehearse our play. And we did that about 2 or 3 times, and then we took up residence in the basement of a closed-down Catholic school. And we started this company with a buddy of mine who I met in West Side Story, and he went to Illinois State University. His name's Jeff Perry. Does anyone know who Jeff Perry is? Really? Well, okay, have you seen that show Scandal? A couple of people have seen it. Many more of you have seen CSI New York, I'm sure. So Scandal, Jeff was on this show Scandal, and he's my best friend from high school, and we started Steppenwolf Theater together. And some of the original members of Steppenwolf Theater, John Malkovich, you know John? Joan Allen, another, Laurie Metcalf. You might know Laurie from Roseanne. She played Roseanne's sister on that. And just a great group of folks. And we started in this basement of a Catholic school. The priest, I went to him, I knew he had this empty basement, and I asked him if he'd let us use it to put on plays, and he said, sure. So all of a sudden we had a theater, and we built an 88-seat theater in there, and that became Steppenwolf Theater. Steppenwolf Theater is now 45 years old. We own 4 buildings in Chicago. We just broke ground on another multi-million-dollar project to build a theater. It's got 50 people. We've won Pulitzer Prizes and Tony Awards and multiple awards. Got a great group of actors that are a part of it. It really is a great American success story when you look at it, the American dream of starting with absolutely nothing but a passionate desire to do something and turning it into something that lasts. We're going on 5 decades that company has been around, and it started with 18-year-old kids. It's pretty neat.
Great story. And then Hollywood beckoned. Here you are with John again.
So that's John and I and Elaine Steinbeck on the set of Mice and Men. And John and I had done, this is 1991, in the San Ynez Valley up above Santa Barbara in California. And John and I had done Of Mice and Men as a play at Steppenwolf in 1980. And then we got the rights to adapt The Grapes of Wrath, which she did. So during the period that we were making that play, that we were writing it and performing it and everything, I got very close with Elaine. And at one point during the run of The Grapes of Wrath, I said, will you give me the rights to make Of Mice and Men into a movie? And she gave me the rights. And she gave me the rights for free. This is unheard of. We got along really well. And it was an important moment. I write about it a lot in the book because it probably led to one of the most significant roles I've ever had.
Apollo 13?
Well, yeah, that's Apollo 13. Yeah, that's right. I got to play T.K. Mattingly in the film. I remember auditioning for the film. Ron Howard said I could come in and audition for any of the astronauts except the one that Tom was going to play, Jim Lovell. So he said, just pick one. I don't care. So I picked T.K. Mattingly, and because I thought the story in the book, even though he doesn't get to go up on the mission, and has everyone seen Apollo 13? All right. You know the story, right? So TK gets pulled off the mission. They think he's been exposed to the measles. They can't send him up into space, so they pull him off the mission. He's replaced in the movie by Kevin Bacon. And so he kind of leaves the story for a little bit, but after the disaster, after the explosion, he gets called back and he makes this heroic entrance and comes in to save the day.
So we're at a presidential library, so we have to show this one. That Truman, David McCullough's book.
Yeah, that's me.
HBO.
Yeah.
So that is one heck of a makeup job.
things were rocking and rolling in my movie career at this point, so I started getting offered some pretty good things. And one of those was to play Harry Truman for HBO. And so I didn't know that much about Truman. I started reading about him. I wasn't sure I was the right guy, but they thought I was. And once I read the book and really started digging into some of the material and everything like that, I thought, I'm going to give this a try. It was a long, involved thing, but the movie did really well. It won a bunch of awards, and I got some attention, and it led to some other great things along the way.
I was going to go to Tracers next.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay, so this was back to theater.
Yeah, so we can backtrack a little bit because this plays a very significant part in the veterans' work. After I met my wife's brothers, her sister's husband was a combat medic in Vietnam. He stayed in the Army for about 22 years. My wife's sister served in the Army. She and the combat medic had a son. He was in the Army for 13 years, 2 deployments to Afghanistan. A lot of veterans in my family. And after I met the Vietnam veterans in my family, I just felt such compassion for our Vietnam veterans. How many veterans are here in the audience? Can our veterans raise their hand? Thank you for serving our country. And our Vietnam veterans played a very significant role in my life and what I'm doing today, because it was even more so than the World War I and World War II and Korea era veterans in my own family. It was the Vietnam veterans on my wife's side of the family that really kind of changed me back in the late 70s and early 80s. When I got to know them and they started talking about their service in Vietnam, what it was like for them to come home. They were just slightly older than I was, and here they were getting shot at in the jungle and then coming home to a divided nation who turned its back on them. And I felt terrible for them. I felt heartbroken and compassion, and so I wanted to try to do something as a young guy to kind of to pay tribute to our Vietnam veterans. So I started supporting them in different ways in Chicago in the early 80s. And I was the artistic director of Steppenwolf Theater, so the primary job of the artistic director is to pick plays for the actors to be in, or for our directors to direct. So I started looking for a play that would talk about the Vietnam veteran experience. And I found one that was being performed in 1980 in Chicago, or in Los Angeles, written by a group of Vietnam veterans, being performed on stage every night by the same Vietnam veterans that wrote the play. Only 2 of them had performed before. The rest of them were just Vietnam veterans who saw an ad in the paper about making a play based on their experience, and they came and they huddled up and they worked on this thing. They workshopped it for 6 months and they wrote a play, and now they were performing it. And I went and saw it. It was called Tracers. And I was so moved by it, I went back the next night and saw it again, and then I begged these veterans to let me do it in Chicago. And they didn't want to let me do it because they felt it should always be performed by veterans. And then it closed in Los Angeles, and nothing was happening to it, and so I just kept bugging them and said, don't let it just go away. Let me do it. And so they gave me the rights to do it in Chicago. And I wanted to prepare my cast to understand the experience and to understand my passion for wanting to tell this story so completely and as honestly as I could. And so we started workshopping and doing all kinds of things to prepare for it. And one of those things was to do a boot camp-like thing. And remember, this is 1983. Platoon hadn't come out yet. A couple of movies about Vietnam had come out. The Deer Hunter was one of them, and a few others. But doing a boot camp was kind of a new thing. And I wanted to sequester my cast somewhere. So I met somebody who had a relationship with a summer camp in Michigan. And The summer camp, as you can see, there's snow there. Doesn't look much like Vietnam. But they were able to get me the use of this summer camp that was closed down for the winter, so I could take my cast up to Michigan for 6 days and isolate them in these bungalows. And we just kind of did a boot camp thing. We called it Fort Williams because the guy who played the drill instructor in the play, he was Sergeant Williams, and you may remember the actor Dennis Farina. Dennis Farina played Sergeant Williams in Tracers. And so I asked Dennis to kind of put us through our drill instructor paces while we were isolated up in the snow. And that's what this is. We came back, we performed the play on stage. It became a gigantic hit in Chicago, and word got out in the veteran community. So veterans started coming to the show. And then I wanted to let them in for free, so we made one night a week, Tuesday night, Veterans Night at Steppenwolf. We had 220 seats, and we'd have 200 veterans in the audience every Tuesday night. They kept coming back over and over and over. It became this cathartic, important thing. Their stories were being told on stage at Steppenwolf Theater. It was a gigantic moment in my life as a director, and as a veterans advocate. It laid the groundwork for what would happen in the 90s and beyond.
So into the 90s, Forrest Gump.
So the groundwork had been laid, in Chicago with the support of Vietnam veterans groups in the 80s. Remember how Lieutenant Dan talks about his destiny? His destiny was to be a great officer and, either to go on in service or to fall in battle, or he never thought he'd be wounded. Well, in some ways, I just felt this was my part. And I wanted it badly, having been involved with supporting Vietnam veterans since the early 80s, having them in my family. I wanted to play Lieutenant Dan Taylor for our Vietnam veterans. And I thought the story of Lieutenant Dan was something that we really hadn't seen in the movies. If you remember the movies from the 70s and 80s that were made about Vietnam, Platoon, Apocalypse Now, Coming Home, Casualties of War, Deer Hunter. If you look at those movies, either the Vietnam veteran is not going to be okay at the end of those films, or you have a big question as to whether he's going to be okay at the end of those films. And what happens at the end of Forrest Gump and the Lieutenant Dan story? We hadn't seen a Vietnam veteran come home from Vietnam, move on with his life, be successful in business, go on. And that was a beautiful story. He comes home from Vietnam, goes through, all Lieutenant Dan wants to do is be a great soldier. That's all he wants. That's what he wants. That's taken away from him, and he has to kind of come to grips with that. And remember, this is the Vietnam era where Vietnam veterans are just disappearing. So he goes through all that understandable anguish and anger and pain and post-traumatic stress. He's terribly guilty for walking his platoon into an ambush where many of his men get wounded or killed. He's struggling. But at the end of that film, he's standing up again. He's got new legs. He's successful in business, shrimp. He takes the shrimp money and invests it in some kind of fruit company, if you remember that. Apple, remember? And he's at peace. Remember, he fights that hurricane, and he wrestles those demons down. And at the end of that story, it's the story that we want for every single veteran coming home from war. We want them to be okay. We want them to move on with their lives, and we don't want them to be challenged like
like so many are. And so that's one of the reasons I'm trying to help wherever I can. I want our veterans to do all right. They should know that if you're going to serve our country, we're going to back you up, and we're going to make sure that you're all right.
I remember reading in the book that it was then that you decided you'd like to be part of the USO effort and get out and see more veterans groups. You kind of had to beat the door down a little bit at the USO. They weren't quite sure, particularly when it came to your band, and you were proposing that you add a musical element to this.
Yeah. So one of the great things that happened to me when the movie came out, about 5 weeks after the movie came out, I got a call from the DAV, Disabled American Veterans Organization, and they invited me to come to their national convention. I write about this in the book because it was so significant, and I didn't know what the DAV was. I played the wounded soldier in Forrest Gump. It was getting a lot of attention. The movie was a big hit, and they wanted to give me an award for playing what they called a catastrophically wounded veteran in a positive way, telling the story of somebody who could overcome those challenges and move on in life, right? And so I went to their national convention. I walked out on the stage, and there were 2,000 wounded veterans in the audience. I mean, and it was so emotional that that was 1994, August of 1994. I got very involved with the DAV. 25 years ago. Forrest Gump came out 25 years ago this July. So 25 years ago, August, I started my relationship with the DAV and started working in support of our wounded back then. So seeds were planted in the 80s and 90s, and then along comes September 11th. And there's a chapter in my book called Turning Point, and it really was a turning point for me. Foundations were laid. Veterans in my own family, the veterans I met through Tracers in Chicago in the 80s, the wounded veterans I met through Forrest Gump, supporting them in different ways. And then we deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan after that terrible day. And my heart was just breaking. It was broken. Everyone can remember that. You know, we all have our experience of how we reacted to that and what it did to us. And some raised their hand and went off to serve. I remember my heart was just broken, and I wanted to do something. And I knew that I had to do something. I remember the Friday after the Tuesday. September 11th was Tuesday. George W. Bush made Friday a national day of prayer for the nation. And churches, houses of worship all over the country were just filled to the gills. Everybody looking for, how do I get rid of this pain and this fear? What's going to happen to our country? Where are we going? And I remember I got to the church and it was just filled. We couldn't sit down. I was standing against the wall, and I heard our priest say a bunch of things. But what I got out of that day was that service is a great healer. And so I raised my hand. And we started deploying to Afghanistan. Then we deployed to Iraq in March of 2003. And I started calling the USO. And I'd leave a message. I'm Gary Sinise. I want to go on a USO tour. I want to go to Iraq. Let me help. And then didn't hear anything. So I called him back. I said, hi, I'm Gary Sinise, and I'd love to go to Iraq. Can I go visit the troops? And then I didn't hear anything again. So I thought, So I called him back a third time, and I said, "Hi, I'm Gary Sinise. I'm the guy that played Lieutenant Dan. I want to go on a tour." Got a call back. Really, really fast. So, it was 2003. I'd done a bunch of things. I mean, I'd won awards and all that kind of stuff, but I guess, I was still, I wasn't, super popular or anything like that. But they knew who Lieutenant Dan was, and everybody knew who Lieutenant Dan was. So next thing I know, I'm on a tour to Iraq. June of 2003, my first tour that summer. And I wasn't working at the time, so I went on my first tour. And then I came back, and I said, send me someplace else. So within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I was in Italy visiting our troops. I would just go out and I would just talk to the troops, and I would visit with them and take pictures and shake hands, and they'd call me Lieutenant Dan. They didn't know what my name was. They would just call me Lieutenant Dan. And so after this trip, and for that whole 6-month period where I was just going on one trip after another, I kept telling the USO people, I have some musicians that I play with, and I'd love to bring them on a tour. And they'd shake their heads, yeah. Actor with a band is not a good combination. And finally after this is my 6th tour in 6 months for the troops. I just kept bugging them again, and they said, okay, we'll set up a tour. When I was in Korea on that tour, I got offered CSI New York. And I was trying to decide on that tour whether I should do CSI New York or not, because I was used to going from part to part, and I didn't know what it would be like to play one role, over a long period of time, same part. But I made the decision to go ahead and shoot the pilot. We shot the pilot, and then I went on another band tour. And there's a great chapter in my book about that moment, called Perfect Timing. And the timing of CSI New York coming into my life and being so successful, it ran 9 seasons, coupled with the work that I was trying to do for our military and our veteran community, going out there, all of a sudden, I'm on a hit television series. I have this giant public platform week after week after week. It's an international hit in 200 markets around the world, and I owned a piece of the action. So it gave me financial security that I never imagined, and I was able to do all kinds of wonderful things with it, including eventually starting a foundation.
So let's talk a little bit about the work of your foundation, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. This is a shot of you. I think, is this the Operation Iraqi Children?
Yeah, so this is 2009 in Afghanistan. Mike Scaparrotti was there. He was a 2-star running things there, and that's where Mike and I really, became good pals. And he took me out. During that trip, I went out and visited some Iraqi schools that had been refurbished by our troops. They'd been rebuilt. And I came home and I wanted to support that good feeling that I felt that day, because the Iraqi kids were just smothering our troops. They were so loving with our soldiers, and same thing with the soldiers, just taking real responsibility for looking out for these kids. So we started shipping school supplies over to the troops. And that turned into a 9-year program where we shipped hundreds of thousands of school supply to not only Iraq, but Afghanistan, Djibouti, Haiti, different places where our troops were deployed, hundreds of thousands of school supply kits. And on this particular trip, I arranged to bring 500 backpacks full of school supplies over to Afghanistan. And it was a goodwill mission. And these supplies over a long period of time, a nine-year period, really were a good hearts and minds tool for our troops. I started the program with Laura Hillenbrand, who wrote Seabiscuit and also Unbroken. And Laura and I teamed up, and we started the program called Operation Iraqi Children. When we branched out to other nations where our troops were deployed, we called it Operation International Children, OIC.
So the next year, 2010, you're here at the library, and somebody here, you're getting your foundation started, raising money. Somebody here wrote you a check while you were here.
I was up in the apartment, and Mrs. Bush said, "Gary, come here. Take this check." And she wrote a check for $1,000 and donated it to the Gary Sinise Foundation. Very early donation. We were just getting started. In fact, we had just launched in June, and I think that was November of, we launched the foundation in June of 2011, and in November I was here. Yeah. So we were just getting started. It was one of our early donations. And, I started the foundation because I'd been doing so much of this stuff. And I've been supporting, one of the ways that I've found that I could be useful is by reaching out not only to the USO or the DAV, but to many military charities that were operating in various spaces supporting our troops, our wounded. One of our soldiers had been blown up in Iraq, and he lost both his arms and both his legs. And he was, his name's Brendan Morocco. And Brendan was in April of 2009. I met him at Walter Reed about 3 weeks after he got there, after being blown up. And the next year, these guys come to me on the set of CSI New York, and they say, we got a quadruple amputee. We want to build him a house. He's from Staten Island. His name's Brendan Morocco. And I said, I know who you're talking about. I've seen him in the hospital. I've talked to his mother. They asked me if I'd do a fundraising concert. So I did a fundraising concert at the St. George's Theater in Staten Island to raise money to build Brendan a home. And when we were preparing to get ready for that concert, I got a call saying there's another quadruple amputee that just came in, wounded Marine. And I said to the guys, hey, I'll do another concert. Let's raise money and do another house. So that started me on home building. And when I started my own foundation, we created what we call our RISE program, Restoring Independence, Supporting Empowerment. That's just what we do by providing these smart technology homes. If you're missing your arms and legs, you're severely wounded, you're challenged, some of your independence is lost, you depend on other people, and we try to put things into these houses that allow somebody who is missing a limb or has a physical challenge because of their service. We try to provide opportunities within the house, the way we design them, so that they can be more independent. And this is Christian Brown. He's a Marine. About 6 days before he lost his legs, he was in a terrible firefight. One of his Marines got hit in the head. He was bleeding out. Christian, they couldn't get the helo in to where they were because it was too hot. So Christian picked him up and ran 1,000 meters with this guy on his back, trying to get him to that helicopter. He received a Silver Star for that, and six days later, he stepped on an IED and lost his legs. So he's in Tennessee, and we built him a house there. And now with all the projects that I've been involved with since 2010 with Brendan Morocco, and all the projects that are in development right now or under construction right now, we're over 70 houses for our wounded at this point.
Very good. Excellent. This Snowball. Snowball.
So this is a fun shot. So one of the things I was looking to do as we started receiving word back from the battlefront in Afghanistan and Iraq that we were losing service members, getting killed. We had fallen heroes, and every time that would happen, it would just break my heart. And I started thinking about their children and wanted to try to find some way to help their kids. So I signed up for the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund. And the Intrepid is based in New York. It's the Fisher family If you're from Fisher House, is one of the programs that I supported early on. A wonderful program. They build special homes at our military hospitals and VA hospitals where the families that are, looking for a place to stay while somebody's going through rehabilitation, they can stay in these houses for free. So I met some of those folks, and I wanted to do something to help the Fallen Heroes Fund. They would provide scholarships for children of our fallen. But I wanted to get more actively involved in kids, and I hadn't found the right thing with our Gold Star children. And so in 2007, I get a call from a group of veterans, like 2 or 3 veterans, Vietnam guys. And they call me up and they say, can we come and talk to you about a project that we've got going? We just did this big event down at Disney for the kids of our fallen heroes. And I said, I want to hear about it. So they came to my set and they sat with me and they showed me a video that was made about this program that they called Snowball Express. And it was to bring hope and healing to the children of our fallen heroes by providing an opportunity for them to come together, meet each other in an environment of love and support and joy and fun. And last year, I went to Disney and I asked them if we could make an arrangement to bring the kids to Disney World. Because we stayed at Disneyland for 3 years, then we went to Dallas. American Airlines is a big supporting sponsor of Snowball Express. They provide 12 charter airplanes for us every year to fly these kids.
Wow.
To incredible. Plus, multiple tickets. And American has been a great partner of mine since 2007 when I met them during this Snowball Express event. And so we moved to Dallas because that's their hub. And we stayed in Dallas for 9 years. And then we wanted to mix it up, so I went to Disney, and I've had a great relationship with Disney, done some movies with them, done a bunch of stuff at Disney World. And we made an arrangement to take the kids to Disney World. It was going to cost a lot more money to do that. So we decided to bring Snowball Express under the Gary Sinise Foundation as a program. My foundation was now up and running, raising a good amount of money every year. We thought we could support it a lot better, and we'd have the opportunity to raise the money better if we brought it under the Gary Sinise Foundation. So last December, for our first time, it was a program of the Gary Sinise Foundation, and we took 1,722 people, Gold Star family members, over 1,000 of them children, to Disney World for 4 days and showered them with love and joy.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. So this is taking veterans to New Orleans.
This is another great program. Obviously, we're in a short window here with our World War II veterans. I've had a tremendous relationship for about 10 years with the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. My Uncle Jack was on a B-17 bomber over Europe. I had sent my Uncle Jack there. They record our World War II veterans on video and preserve them in the archive at the museum, and they use them throughout the museum. As you walk, you can press a button, and you can see a 90-year-old veteran talking about this battle at this bridge, and he's telling the story. So I called up my friends at the museum and asked how I could help, and they said, maybe you could fund an additional historian. Because as time goes on, it gets harder for us to get the veterans to come to the museum, but we want to send more historians out across the country to record our veterans. So we started funding one of their historians. And then I said, I want to do something even better. I want to try to get as many veterans down here as possible while we still have the opportunity. So once again, I went to my pals at American, and I said, I got another idea. And, much like Honor Flight, we know about Honor Flight takes our veterans to D.C., to the memorials. We created what is called our Soaring Valor program at the Gary Sinise Foundation. And we've taken upwards of 700 veterans in the last 2 or 3 years down to the museum. In early 2017, we added a component where we now, we do about 5 trips a year. 3 of them, we pair up high school students, each with a veteran. And so you've got a 16-year-old or 17-year-old with a travel buddy who's over 90, going down to the World War II Museum. We start the night before they leave, and they meet their veteran, and they spend time with their veteran at a dinner. Then they get on the airplane and sit right next to him, and they travel with them to New Orleans. We shower them with love when they get off the airplane. We take them to the museum, and each one of these veterans spends quality time with students, sharing the importance of service and sacrifice and what it was like all those years ago when freedom was so thinly on the line. Never before in our history, or the history of the world, has freedom been in jeopardy like it was then. And thankfully, with these gentlemen here and the ladies that served in World War II, freedom won. And we're taking advantage of the time we have with them.
So I think we'll go ahead and take some questions from our audience members. Thank you, Sarah. Just have to throw in one more shot here, though. I think, here we go. You look so happy when you're playing that guitar. This is the Lieutenant Dan band.
So this is at Walter Reed. We do festivals at the military hospitals. We started doing them in 2012 at Naval Medical Center in San Diego. I was down there doing a visit, just walking through the hospital, and I was standing outside about to get in my car, and I said, we could probably put a stage right over here and bring some food out here and get everybody outside. And so the Admiral then said, great. So we did that, and that started our Invincible Spirit Festivals.
A few questions from our audience here. As an academic advisor at Texas A&M, what would you like us to pass along to students to help them understand the importance of the work you're doing with your foundation?
Well, yes, I think of myself as an academic advisor as well. Yes. Let's skip that part. Look, as I said, President Bush said it all the time. Public service is service to others is good for the soul. It makes a difference. I would recommend it to anyone with a broken heart. You forget your own broken heart a lot faster if you're trying to help somebody get over theirs. And it's been a great healer for me. I mean, I've met extraordinary people. I met a group of folks from the Wounded Warrior Project today. Can you stand up? Let's have them stand up. And
there they are.
So I've met extraordinary people who have just been resilient in their determination to power through. And I've been to the hospitals multiple times, and I tell a story of going into the first military hospital and the apprehension that I had. It was Landstuhl, by the way, but they all had that sort of quiet, sort of 1,000-yard look, when I walked in the room. And remember, nobody knew my name, So I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm this little guy, and I've got glasses and a funny USO hat on. And I walked in, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I'm thinking, what am I going to see, and how is it going to be? And somebody looked up at me and said, Lieutenant Dan! And then the whole room changed. Everybody started laughing and running up to me and asking for a picture. And the whole room went from 1,000-yard stare to like, tell us about those legs, and how'd they do those legs, and shrimp and all that stuff. Ice cream. all that Forrest Gump talk. And the whole mood changed. It was different. And then I went up to the hospital rooms, and that moment kind of loosened me up a little bit. And then I saw some more severely wounded up in the hospital rooms. And then when I left there, I had a completely different feeling from when I got there. Because I left there feeling that I'd done some good. Like my showing up. Just simply showing up made a difference. And then I showed up again, and I showed up again, and I showed up again, and I saw that my time spent was having an impact. And it was helping to heal that broken heart. So service to others can make a big difference in your life. And this really is a journey from self to service. And what service, I hope that anyone who reads the book can kind of read about the people that have inspired me because of their resilience and their courage and their dedication to our country and serving our country and what they've been through, and be inspired by that. I know for an academic like me, it really made a big difference.
Next question. So, with all of your acting accolades and awards, what do you believe has been your greatest success in your career?
In my career?
In your career.
Or just in my acting career?
Well, it says with all the acting accolades, including your acting, what do you regard as your greatest success?
My kids. My kids.
Who, by the way, are involved in your foundation?
I have 3 kids and 2 grandchildren. And and my wife and I have been together since 1976. We got married in 1981. We have 3 beautiful kids. I'm so proud of these kids. My son works for the foundation. And, they're good folks, and I'm proud of them. So. I was blessed with the perfect timing of CSI New York that gave me financial security so I could pick and choose and be more selective and apply myself to something that I think all that success in the acting business prepared me for, which was to service to our country and service to our defenders and trying to make a difference and do something positive and trying to leave something positive for my kids to look toward. If I've done that, it's life well lived, I think.
So last question. So this is another one of those tough ones. So with all of your exposure to the military, if you decided to go into the military, what branch would you pick? Now wait. And it says go Air Force here. So do you think?
How many Marines do we have here? Stand up, Marines. Stand up. Let me see all the Marines. How many Navy do we have here? Any Navy here? Let's see all the Navy. How many Air Force do we have here today? That's it. Let's see the Air. Okay. Any Coast Guard here today?
Coast Guard.
There's our. And how many U.S. Army do we have here today?
Wow, look at that.
Well, I'll have to say U.S. Army because I think the what happened? Hello.
There it goes.
I think the Army and the Air Force probably have to duke it out a little bit.